Hi, it's a chilly Monday afternoon where I am, and I hope the weather is fine wherever you are, especially if you're in Australia with the heat wave washing over you. Please stay safe. But anyway, welcome. Here's what I'm thinking about. This week, let's talk about quantum dots, market liquidity, and why being the best is worth every last bit of effort. So there's this video on why markets don't trade 24/7 by InTheMoney. I'll link it in the description so that you can watch it too. But anyway, in short, the idea he was sharing was that markets are prices are regulated by the fact that there are a lot of buyers, there are a lot of sellers, there is liquidity injected into the markets, right? And when you reduce the number of actors in the market to just one buyer and one seller, price just goes completely whack. The seller is free to price however much he wants, right? He could sell you an Apple for like $1 trillion, and the buyer is free to insist on as low a price as they want, like buying a Ferrari for like $0.50. So you see that the injection of competition, the injection of other actors in the market sort of ameliorates the insanity that would otherwise emerge. And that's kind of how markets have their invisible hand regulating and moving prices. In the grand scheme of things, everyone comes towards a sort of unhappy compromise with each other. The sellers sell a bit lower, the buyers buy a little bit higher. I think there was a line from Star Trek Enterprise by this Captain Archer. He said something to the effect of a compromise is a solution which both sides are unhappy with. So in a way, you can think of it that way, right? Everything tends towards a grand medium, a grand average, a rather mediocre price. Now for quantum dots, why I think they're related is because I've recently been studying quantum dots and nanomaterials. And quantum dots are interesting in that their size, they are essentially typical semiconducting materials, but made on such a small scale that some strange behaviors emerge. Much like markets, originally materials have large bands representing the amalgamated possible states that an electron can occupy. I'm not really going to go too deep into this, just take my word for it, right? But in semiconductors, there's the conducting, there are, conduction bands, which represent, once you're here, that means you're going around conducting electricity, and valence bands, where if you got all the electrons to just chill the hell out, right, bring it down to absolute zero, they'd all just fall nicely into the valence band. So anyway, the gap between these two bands is the band gap, and the ability to manipulate the band gap and getting electrons to cross under the right conditions is how most semiconductors and transistors work. But anyway, in quantum dots, when you go around really small, these band gaps, the bands themselves, they evaporate, right? Because they're actually just an amalgamation of all the possible states that could exist in the material itself, right? But when you reduce the number of atoms down to you have 1,200 or so atoms in that one little small ball, right? It's the same thing as what happens in the market when you remove liquidity. You go back to that one actor, that one buyer, one seller situation, right? And the interesting thing is the band gap actually widens when you do this. It's tied to this thing called the Bruce equation, which correlates the additional band gap with the confinement of the electron. That means the smaller the space that you squeeze it into, the gap actually gets wider. And this is how quantum dots manifest their interesting properties, which is when you shine UV light into them, they almost perfectly radiate light in a specific wavelength, right? And this wavelength is governed by the band gap. So if you look at Samsung's QLED technology, right, it's really just using quantum dots and getting them to shine that particular wavelength, and it's a really efficient way of getting otherwise perfectly homogeneous single wavelength kind of output. Yeah. But anyway, I must admit, I don't really know the specific technicalities of all of this. If anyone has something to share about it, you're most welcome to talk about it. But anyway, notice that both sides have this parallel where as you reduce the number of actors in the market, or the number of atoms involved in that quantum dot, the band gap gets wider. Think of it as a price, right? The price you pay for someone's services, the value that a person has, is also related to how rare they are, right? How good they are. That's why I feel it's worthwhile putting in it a little bit more effort to be better than everyone else. Okay, maybe not the best, as I mentioned at the start, because that's a really high bar, right? There's always someone who is going to be better than you. There's always going to be some genius somewhere who can do everything you can do with their eyes closed while in a handstand and probably like juggling 3 rabbits at the same time, right? But it pays off to be a bit better than everyone else. It's a sort of network effect, a sort of gravity that goes on here, a sort of achievement gravity, I would think of it, right? If you're good at something, better than everyone else, people will pay attention to you. They'll come up to you, hey, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? You get a lot more opportunities to expose and improve and to learn and to challenge and stretch yourself, which in turn makes you a little bit better than other people who are currently at your level, right? Then you go a little bit further. So there's a sort of aggregation, a gravity that pulls in the opportunities for growth and improvement, which in turn makes you even more attractive in that way. But where do you start, right? In the super duper grand scheme of things, and let's say everyone's all starting off on an even playing field, a relatively even playing field. Some people are going to start off with a little higher, a bit lower, right? Natural variations in human talent, duh. But what is it going to be that gets you the step ahead? Well, it's putting in a little bit more effort, right? And then afterwards, when you make that leap, you get a little bit better, and then you take off. The nature of us people, us humans, is that we like to tend towards mediocrity. It's comfortable to be just like everyone else, right? You see, like the guy beside you is putting 2 hours of study into something. The girl on the left is training at 50% capacity. It's comfortable to tend towards what everyone else is doing. Social animals, social proof, all these things, push us towards mediocrity, right? The same way that the universe tends towards chaos and entropy. But just because it is that way doesn't mean it's the best way. The way for you to flourish is that initial investment of effort to step out of what is comfortable, to step out of the shadows of mediocrity and say, no, I desire competence and I'm willing to put myself out for that. And that helps you grow. Because then, you're a bit better, people turn and come to you, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? I don't know what's this. Which in turn improves your understanding, and then you get better and you get better and get better, right? And case in point, I guess an example to help you understand this a little bit more concretely is, let's say I ask you, okay, I'm going to build a PC, right? What do you recommend I get for a CPU? For the average person, they're going to just casually tell you, you should get an Intel i9, blah, 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 blah. Whether or not the Intel i9s are actually the best in the market, nobody knows. Right? Maybe at that point in time, the generations have gone whack and Intel is at the bottom of the market, which is currently the case with Tiger Lake. Not really as good as what the AMD Ryzens are doing. And in fact, I think even Apple's A14 Bionic outclasses it in some ways. But anyway, the point is that Intel has become so known for putting out good chips that the average person who is not really in tune with the realities on the ground is going to just straight up go to them whenever they need a chip, whenever they need a CPU, right? And that helps them grow, because your market can't just be the people who are in the field. Anyway, they are the ones who are really hard to please, right? It's when you build that reputation of competence and reliability that you really do take off. People come to you, people want to hire you, people want to hit on you, blah, blah, blah. So all this and that. So there is value in taking that first initial step to step out of the shadows of mediocrity and incompetence. Okay, maybe not incompetence, but you know what I mean, right? If you want to be more than average, then you're going to have to put in a little bit more than average. Whatever got you there is not going to get you elsewhere. Yeah. So anyway, the initial investment is worthwhile. The pain is worthwhile because competence and ability has an attractive force. It's self-fulfilling. It's a prophecy that writes and fulfills and completes itself. So all it takes is for you to take that first step, right? And if you've already taken the first step and you find yourself stagnating it, then you need to take another, right? And whatever it is, in some way, in the grand scheme of things, it will be worth it. So I encourage you to take that first step, to be a little bit more hardworking, to invest a little bit more time, forgo that little bit of rest. Don't be too wacky about it though. Don't let it consume you, right? But, in the grand push and pull, we all tend towards mediocrity, and I ask you, I encourage you to fight it. So anyway, that's what I've been thinking about. See ya.